The road leading to St. Peter's Convent was narrow and winding, flanked by gnarled trees that clawed at the sky. My car bumped along the uneven path. The gray clouds above swirling ominously. When the convent finally came into view, I was struck by its grim majesty. The towering stone walls, now crumbling with age, loomed like a monument to forgotten sins. Vines twisted along the structure, and broken stained glass windows glinted faintly in the dim light. I parked near the rusted iron gate, which creaked loudly as I pushed it open. The overgrown grass whispered against my boots, and the wind carried a faint chill. I pulled my camera and recorder from my bag, steeling myself as I stepped toward the entrance. For a moment, I hesitated, glancing back at the road. It was as though the shadows of the trees were stretching toward me, urging me to leave. I was greeted at the entrance by the Reverend Mother and Sister Agnes.
How was your journey, dear?
The Reverend Mother told me that nobody lived in the convent anymore, due to strange occurrences and the dilapidation of the building. She told me that all nuns depart from the premises before sunset, and that all special ceremonies were held in the mornings only. After I stopped my recorder, the Reverend Mother asked me,
Are you a man of faith, my dear? I will be praying for you.
The nuns left keys to the convent on a desk and said they had opened all the doors. Sister Agnes looked pale and frightened. Inside, the air was heavy, thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Dust coated every surface, and the faint echoes of my footsteps seemed to stretch on endlessly. The walls were lined with faded tapestries, scenes of saints and martyrs, their faces twisted and distorted by time. A shattered crucifix lay on the ground, its wooden frame splintered. I took slow, deliberate steps, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. A sense of unease settled over me. The silence wasn't empty. It felt alive. I reached the main hall, where long wooden pews stretched out like forgotten sentinels. As I approached the altar, my heart skipped a beat. For just a moment, I thought I saw a figure kneeling in prayer, but the shadows swallowed it before I could focus. A faint sound broke the silence, a soft, rhythmic tapping. I followed it to a side corridor where a single candle flickered in an iron sconce. The tapping grew louder as I approached a locked door at the end of the hallway. When I pressed my ear against it, a voice whispered, "Turn back." The door suddenly rattled violently and I stumbled back, my heart racing. I reached the chapel, where a beam of faint light illuminated the altar. The air grew colder as I approached. My eyes were drawn to the loose stone near the altar, a corner jutting slightly upward. As I crouched to investigate, a sudden chill swept through me, and I heard a faint whisper. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Turning slowly, I saw her, the Black Nun. She stood at the far end of the chapel, her tattered habit billowing unnaturally. Her face was shrouded in shadow, but her glowing red eyes burned into me. I stumbled back, barely managing to hold my flashlight steady. When I blinked, she was gone. Shaken but determined, I pried the loose stone free. Beneath it lay a shallow grave. The bones were wrapped in decayed black fabric, and beside them lay a tarnished crucifix. Scratched into the stone above the grave were the words, "Forgive me." My hands trembled as I reached for my recorder, trying to document the find. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed behind me. I turned sharply, but the chapel was empty. The air felt heavier now, and a low hum resonated through the walls. Gathering my courage, I took the crucifix and hurried out of the chapel. In one of the convent's abandoned rooms, I found a small leather-bound diary tucked beneath a pile of debris. The pages were fragile, filled with anguished confessions. The nun wrote of her affair with a visiting nobleman, her guilt consuming her. She described the day the other nuns discovered her secret, the betrayal, the punishment. The final entry ended abruptly.
They are coming for me, God forgive them.
Deeper in the convent, I stumbled upon a hidden door. Beyond it lay a small, suffocating room. At its center was an altar carved from blackened stone. The symbols etched into its surface seemed to writhe in the flickering light. A blood-stained crucifix leaned against the altar, and the air smelled of iron and ash. As I stepped closer, I felt the weight of the room pressing down on me. The walls seemed to breathe, and the shadows writhed like living things. I placed the crucifix from the grave on the altar, and the room erupted with sound. A guttural chant echoed around me, growing louder and louder. The Black Nun appeared before the altar, her skeletal hands reaching out. Her face shifted between human and monstrous, her hollow eyes burning with fury. Her voice boomed in my mind, accusing me, condemning me for disturbing her rest. I held up the crucifix from the grave, shouting the words from the diary. "God, forgive them!" The nun's scream pierced the air and the walls began to tremble. Shadows erupted from the corners of the room, swirling violently as she lunged toward me. I bolted from the room, the walls of the convent groaning as if alive. The shadows pursued me, clawing at my legs and arms. I burst through the front doors, collapsing onto the overgrown grass outside. When I looked back, the convent seemed to shudder before falling silent. Back home, I reviewed my recordings. In the final moments, a faint whisper emerged.
Thank you.
But as I turned off the recorder, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror, the Black Nun standing just behind me.
Some sins refuse to be buried.